Listen carefully because what I'm about to tell you is going to hurt. You are not free. You never have been. You think your decisions are your own, that you walk through life with free will. But you've spent decades obeying a script written long before you were born. Look closely at yourself. Your desires, your fears, your goals. Everything is contaminated by a poisonous idea planted in your mind that you will only be complete once you find someone to accompany you. Do you feel it? That knot in your stomach isn't a coincidence. It's the result of believing that solitude is a punishment. They've convinced you that being alone equals being broken, and that remaining single is some kind of failure that leaves you exposed before others. But do you know what's truly terrifying? That lie has guided every step of your life without you noticing. Think for a moment. How many decisions have you made only to avoid being alone? How many times have you accepted a kiss you didn't want, a commitment that didn't fit, a routine that silenced your inner voice? Just because you feared the emptiness of your own company? Don't deny it. You've done it, and you're still doing it. Just like millions of people who aren't owners of themselves, but slaves to the myth of romantic love. But listen to this idea Nietzsche hurled like a dagger into the heart of culture. Solitude is not absence, it is power. I'll repeat it because you need to engrave it in your mind like fire on iron. Solitude is power. What for the herd is an unbearable abyss. For the authentic individual is fertile ground. The noise of the crowds prevents you from hearing your own voice. Only in the radical silence of solitude can you discover who you are. Do you understand? Most people don't think, they repeat. Most people don't choose, they imitate. And they do it because they're afraid of being left with themselves. Now tell me, what is more terrifying? That no one loves you, or that you never come to know yourself? Because that is the real trap. Accepting the model of life they sell you means slowly surrendering yourself to an invisible sacrifice. Giving up your essence in order to preserve a relationship you never truly asked for, but were taught to desire. Do you know how many people live chained this way? Countless. They walk with smiles on their faces and shackles on their souls. Culture told you that love was fulfillment. Nietzsche saw it the other way. Many times, it is prison. Don't get it twisted. I'm not talking about tenderness or sincere affection. I'm talking about the imposed model of the couple as mandatory salvation, of marriage as a contract that crushes your individuality. In the name of this idea, thousands condemn themselves to repetition, to mediocrity, to a simulation of life where every gesture is edited to please the other. Does that sound like freedom to you? Do you really think your existence only makes sense when someone chooses you? The truth, though it frightens you, is this: being alone may be the only authentic act in a world of masks. And no, it isn't a curse. It is a privilege that few can bear. Because solitude exposes who you are without makeup, and most cannot stand to look at themselves in the mirror without adornments. What happens when you turn off your phone? When you close the door? When no one is left around? That's when silence appears. And in that silence, all the truths you've repressed begin to scream. That moment is unbearable for those who've built their identity on the gaze of others. Here's where it gets disturbing. If you don't know how to be with yourself, you'll never truly be with anyone. Someone who clings to another out of fear of solitude does not love. They cling like a drowning person grabbing onto anything that floats. And what happens when you base your life on that desperation? You end up sacrificing the only thing you truly have, your essence. You cut yourself into pieces to fit into someone else's mold. And you don't even notice, because you repeat the cultural lie that to love means to renounce. No, love does not mean renouncing. Love is not mutilation. True love does not demand the execution of your individuality. The problem is that we were educated in a poisoned romanticism that glorifies sacrifice. And so millions live mutilated lives, believing that pain is noble, when in reality it is nothing but submission disguised as virtue. Nietzsche saw it clearly. Only in solitude is creation born. Only in radical isolation does deep thought emerge. Only in the apparent emptiness of being without a partner can you discover the brutal truth of who you are. And here is the most unsettling part. Choosing solitude means choosing not to betray your integrity. Do you hear it? It is the most radical form of fidelity to yourself. And that fidelity comes at a price that few are willing to pay. The discomfort of silence, the vertigo of freedom. Let me put it more bluntly. You'd rather chain yourself to mediocre relationships than endure the company of your own voice. Do you realize what that means? That you fear yourself more than prison. And that is why the majority will never be free. Because freedom is not a speech, nor a flag, nor an inspiring phrase on social media. Real freedom begins when you decide not to need anyone to be yourself. And that step is so terrifying that almost no one takes it. Look at it from another angle. What is worse? To live alone, at peace with your truth, or to live accompanied while selling your soul every day? Here arises the uncomfortable question. How many times have you silenced your deepest thoughts so as not to unsettle your partner? How many times have you stopped your dreams because they didn't fit the other's plans? Every one of those silences is a betrayal of your essence. Every renunciation is a slow murder of your integrity. And you know it, even if you hide it. You feel it in those nights when you stare at the ceiling and wonder if this life is really yours. That emptiness you feel is not a lack of love. It is a lack of authenticity. Imposed love is a disguise that keeps you asleep, but your subconscious keeps screaming. And that scream is the signal that something is still alive in you. Something that won't accept chains. Nietzsche didn't speak of solitude as suffering, but as privilege. Solitude is not a black hole. It's a secret workshop where strong souls are forged. He who doesn't know how to be alone will never create anything authentic. Great thoughts are not born at romantic dinners. And waste them so. They are born in nights of absolute silence. Inner revolutions are not gestated in shared beds, but in closed rooms where only your breathing resonates. Authentic fidelity is not toward another, it is toward yourself. And here is the secret that almost no one has the courage to accept. Chosen singleness is an act of rebellion, a rupture with the herd, a declaration of war against the culture that wants to mold you into a predetermined role. It is not absence of love. It is excess of authenticity. It is not lack. It is sovereignty. Now, I'll throw you the question that will haunt you after you turn off this video. Are you capable of being alone with yourself without running away? Are you capable of embracing silence until it reveals who you really are? If the answer is no, then you will never be free. Because depending on company to endure life is the most sophisticated form of slavery. And the saddest part is that this slavery comes with applause, social validation, likes, and hypocritical smiles. But it is still slavery, so ask yourself once and for all, do you want to live a life designed to satisfy others' expectations? Or do you prefer to walk in solitude with the brutal honesty of being yourself? Because in that solitary path, though it trembles, though it hurts, though it frightens, lies the only form of freedom worth having. And here's where I want you to pay closer attention, because what comes now is not just an addition. It's a hidden layer of everything I've just revealed. If solitude is power, what happens with emotional dependence? That silent poison that robs you of your voice, your energy, your mental clarity. Most don't even detect it because it's so normalized that we confuse it with love. But what you call love is often nothing but fear in disguise. A desperate need for someone to validate your existence. And that need is a psychological trap that turns millions into emotional beggars. Look closely. An emotional beggar doesn't ask for bread. He asks for attention. He doesn't ask for water. He asks for company. He doesn't ask for freedom. He asks for pretty chains. And the most disturbing part is that he believes that is love. Do you know the root of that dependence? The terror of facing one's own mind. Because in silence arise questions no one wants to hear. Do you really enjoy who you are? Or do you just act to please? Are your dreams truly yours? Or were they implanted? What would happen if no one were watching your life? The void of those answers is so intense that people would rather fill it with any mediocre relationship than endure it. And here is the brutal part. The more afraid you are of being with yourself, the easier you are to manipulate. Because someone who cannot endure their own solitude becomes a slave, willing to trade freedom for company. Now think about this. What does authenticity mean in a world where almost everyone fakes love to avoid facing silence? It means that whoever dares to choose conscious singleness becomes an exile, a marginalized figure in the eyes of the majority. And that exile is not a punishment. It's sacred territory. It's the frontier where you stop living as a copy and begin existing as an original. Those who live chained to empty relationships will never know what it is to walk without permission. And here is the paradox. They will point at you, call you strange, selfish, incomplete, because your freedom reminds them of their prison. I want you to imagine a scenario, a person who lives alone, who doesn't need to fill every hour with company, who doesn't ask for constant validation, who doesn't fear the night in silence. That person becomes unbearable for the herd. because they prove that dependence is not natural, but learned. And when someone proves that life can be lived without those chains, those still chained feel ashamed of themselves. Do you know what they do then? They attack, ridicule, defame, not because there is anything wrong with you, but because your freedom is a mirror that reflects their slavery. And here enters the darkest psychology. Society does not celebrate the autonomous individual. It punishes them. They prefer you predictable, docile, molded. That is why the conscious single becomes a threat. They don't depend. They don't obey. They don't beg for affection. That person breaks the invisible contract that sustains the majority. And that's why Nietzsche admired the solitary. Because within their silence lies the seed of true revolution. Not the revolution of the streets, but the inner revolution, the one that rips you away from rotten expectations and places you face to face with your truth. Now think about this. What would happen if all your energy, the energy you spend maintaining relationships you don't want, enduring empty conversations, faking interest, were redirected towards yourself? The result would be terrifying to those who live on autopilot, because it would mean you could build a life tailored to yourself, without breaks. A life where every decision is no longer contaminated by fear of losing someone. A life where your mind becomes your ally, not your jailer. That is the strength born of chosen solitude. And don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you that love is useless. I'm telling you that love without freedom is not love. It is servitude. That love without authenticity is not a bond. It is a chain. The problem is not loving. The problem is loving out of need. Because need kills choice. And without choice, there is no freedom. Do you see it now? The problem is not being accompanied. The problem is being accompanied out of fear of being alone. That fear is what turns love into prison. So here's the final idea of this part. Solitude is not just fidelity to yourself. It is the filter that separates the authentic from the false. Only the one who can be alone truly knows how to love, because they do not love out of need, but out of choice. Everything else is a pact with fear, and that is the truth almost no one wants to face. That perhaps your most intimate relationship is not with your partner, but with your fear of being left with yourself. And now I want you to imagine something even more unsettling. What if you discovered that the entire cultural machinery glorifying romantic love was not born to make you happy, but to control you? Think about it carefully. Why do you think that since childhood you've heard songs, watched movies, read stories where the ultimate reward is always finding a partner? It's no coincidence. It's a design, a mechanism that ensures you never escape the mold. Because someone who doesn't know how to be alone is much easier to domesticate. Culture doesn't want free individuals. It wants predictable subjects, docile, fitting into the chain of production and consumption. And there's no better way to achieve that than making you believe your worth depends on someone else. Pause for a second and reflect. Who wins when you think being single is a failure? The industries that sell weddings, diamonds, romantic trips, dinners for two, family life insurance. Religions that sustain their power on the basis of indissoluble marriages. systems that prefer to see you busy with sentimental dramas rather than questioning the meaning of your existence. And you lose. You lose time. You lose energy. You lose your purest truth. Isn't it terrifying? You've lived believing you were seeking love when, in reality, you were fulfilling an invisible programming. And here's the disturbing part. Even if you know it, you'll still feel the pressure. Because understanding is not enough. You need the courage to rebel. And rebelling against this is not shouting in the streets. It's something much more radical. Choosing solitude when everyone tells you to run from it. Nietzsche understood it. Solitude is the laboratory of greatness. And now, I want to take you deeper. Because until now, we've spoken of independence, of authenticity. But there is an even more unsettling level. Creativity. Look around you. Who are the ones who change the world? Not those trapped in endless family dinners or absurd domestic arguments. They are the ones who learn to coexist with silence, with emptiness, with endless nights where their only company was their own thought. Solitude is uncomfortable, yes, but it is fertile. From it is born what can never be created in the noise of the crowd. Let me give you a brutal example. Many of history's great geniuses were misunderstood precisely because they chose to step away from the herd. They didn't do it out of arrogance. They did it because they knew that only in that isolation could they hear what others couldn't even perceive. People fear being alone because they can't stand facing their inner demons. They not only face them, they use them as raw material to create. That's the difference between those who survive and those who leave a mark. And here's another angle you hadn't considered. Solitude is not only a space of creation, it is also an implacable mirror. It shows you without adornments, without excuses, without masks. That's why it terrifies. Because in noise, you can fool yourself. You can pretend everything is fine. But in silence, your lie crumbles. What happens when you can no longer blame the other? When you have no one to hold responsible for your emptiness, there appears the truth. The problem was never lack of company. It was lack of authenticity. And here's the most brutal part. When you finally endure that vision, when you stop running and learn to face yourself, something almost miraculous happens. You become indestructible. Because you no longer need an external mirror to validate your existence. You no longer fear abandonment because you discovered that the worst thing that could happen to you, being alone, is in fact your greatest source of power. That is the secret no one wants to tell you. A human being who does not fear solitude is a human being impossible to manipulate. So look at it this way. Every time they tell you it's time you found someone, every time they make you feel incomplete for not having a partner, what they're really revealing is their own fear. They're speaking from the prison they live in. And your task is not to convince them. Your task is not to let yourself be dragged. Because in the end, the true revolution is not convincing the world, but daring to live in a way the world cannot comprehend. Think about this last part. When you choose solitude as a conscious act, you are not renouncing love. You are renouncing slavery. You are saying, I'd rather face the vertigo of my freedom than the comfort of a prison disguised as romance. And there, right there, the most fascinating possibility opens to finally exist as yourself, without chains, without masks, without someone else's script. That is the radical fidelity Nietzsche admired, the one that cannot be negotiated, cannot be bought, cannot be taken from you. And maybe right now, you're feeling a strange vertigo, as if everything you took for certain were crumbling. That vertigo is the signal that your mind has just opened a crack, and through that crack slips something most people never let in: the possibility of a life that depends on no one else. And here is where I want to take you to the climax of this journey. Imagine for a moment that you decide to walk without the script society wrote for you. Imagine that one day you wake up and stop thinking about who accompanies you and start thinking about what you're building. That day you no longer seek to fill a void, because you've discovered the void was never outside. It was always inside. And the most brutal part is that when you learn to fill it with your authenticity, any love that comes afterward will be a gift, not a crutch. See the twist? What they sold you as the happy ending was really a trap. The true happy ending is realizing you don't need to prove anything to anyone, that you don't need to chase a pre-established role, because happiness doesn't arrive when someone chooses you. It arrives when you choose yourself. That is the uncomfortable conclusion most people reject, because they prefer the embrace of a shared lie rather than the rawness of a truth in solitude. But you can no longer go on with the lie, so I want to present the following to you. Our book, The Formula of Awakening, is now available. Do you feel like there's something inside you that wants to awaken, but you don't know where to start? Then I invite you to transform your way of thinking, and with it, your way of living. Discover who you can become. Start today. The link to get the ebook is in the first pinned comment of this video. Grab your copy now at a great price. With that said, let's continue with the video. And now, let me propose something. If you've made it this far into the video, it means that inside you, there is already a part that is tired of chains. A part that wants to break the script and begin writing its own story. Don't ignore it, because that spark you feel now is the beginning of something much greater. And I'd like you to leave a mark down below in the comments by writing a phrase that will be like a pact with yourself. I am the master of my solitude. Write it, and you'll see how powerful it feels to declare your freedom publicly, even with a simple phrase. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe now, because this isn't here to stroke your ego. It's here to open your eyes with truths that disturb but liberate. What's coming next will be even more brutal. And believe me, you won't want to miss it. Won't want to miss it. So I'll say goodbye in an unusual way, not with a farewell, but with silence. Because what is truly valuable isn't in my words. It's in what happens in your head when the words fade. And now, listen to that silence. That is the sound of your freedom calling. If you're ready to walk that path with intention, subscribe to Psyche Nomad and keep sharpening your solitude into strength.